Hey everyone, I'm John, and today we're talking about designing behaviors with tiny habits. Now, there are three key things that you need to keep in mind when designing a behavior. Number one, stop judging yourself. You have to give yourself a break. Number two, you have to take your aspirations and break them down into tiny behaviors. And number three, you have to embrace your mistakes and use those discoveries as a way to move forward. Now, BJ Fogg in this book talks about three ways that you can build a long-lasting habit. Number one is to have an epiphany. More or less, you think about something that you want to do, you go and do it. Number two, you change your environment in some significant way where the habit will happen regardless. Number three, and this is what the book is really about, is to change your behaviors in tiny ways. So this is known as the tiny habit method. The idea here is that you can do a habit in 30 seconds or less. So let's dive into the ABCs of habits, at least from Fogg's perspective. A is for anchor. This is an existing event or kind of a behavior that you engage in, and this is what you can anchor off of. B, behavior. This is the simplest version of your behavior that can take 30 seconds or less. And C, celebration. This is something positive, especially reinforcement that you can use so that you can celebrate your wins. Now, Fogg gives you a formula for habit success. It's known as B equals MAP. Otherwise, your behavior happens when your motivation, your ability, and a prompt all exist at the same time. Here is the Fogg behavior model, and this is going to help you visualize what your behaviors actually are. You'll notice on the y-axis, you have motivation. Motivation can be high or it can be low. On the x-axis, you have your ability. Something can be hard or something can be easy. And then you have this prompt line, which is where do you actually take action? Anything above that action line, you're going to be able to succeed with your habits. Let's talk about 4 ways you can use this behavior model. Number 1, the more motivated you are to do a behavior, the more likely you're going to do the behavior. Number 2, the harder a behavior is, the less likely you'll do that behavior. Number 3, motivation and ability work in tandem. They can either work for you or against you. And number 4, no behavior will actually happen without a prompt. This makes it really easy for us to troubleshoot our behaviors. You can first check if there's a prompt to see if your behavior will even be prompted. You can then see if you have the ability to actually do the behavior. And finally, you can see if you have the motivation to do the behavior. One thing that we should clear up though is the difference of a behavior and an aspiration. A behavior is something that you can do right now. It's something that you can do either this second or somewhere near in the future. An aspiration, however, is more of a collection of your behaviors and the outcome that comes from it. And your key of lasting change in your life is really finding the behaviors that you want to be doing. There is a concept of golden behaviors. These are high impact behaviors that are more or less things that you want to be doing. Now, Fogg also gives a concept of the ability chain. It's a way that we can debug if we have the ability to do a habit or a behavior. The first thing you can ask yourself is, do I have enough time to do this? The second thing you can ask is, do I have money to support this? Number 3 is to ask yourself, do you have the physical ability to do it? Number 4 is, how much mental energy will it take to do the habit? And number 5 is, does this habit fit my routine in any way today? And all of these lead to what's known as the breakthrough question, which is more or less, how can I make it easier to do? So let's talk about how you can make a behavior easy to do. And the first thing you can do is to build skill. And skill comes from repetition, from doing it over and over and over again. The second thing you can do is you can leverage tools and resources to make it easier for you. And lastly, again, this is what this book is about, is to break things down into the smallest possible thing you can do today. Fogg also talks about how to make an actionable prompt, something that will actually prompt us and will act upon. There's 3 main prompts that we're going to cover here. Number 1 is your personal prompt. It's this idea that your body, your brain, your emotions, they're going to more or less cue you or prompt you to do something. And number 2 is a context prompt. This is a prompt in your environment that is more or less going to prompt you to take action. And number 3 is an action prompt. This is a prompt where you use an existing behavior to anchor against with your new behavior that you want to cultivate. So there are 3 words that you should remember. Emotions create habits. Let's say that again. Emotions create habits. And whenever you're going to celebrate a habit, there are 3 key moments that you should do this. The first time is when you actually remember the habit before you actually engage in it. The second is when you're actually doing the habit while you're actually engaged in it. And number 3 is immediately after you've done the habit, right after you do it. As you continue to celebrate your habits, your confidence and your skill are going to grow with it. Now, you may have heard from people that a habit takes 21 days, 60 days, or somewhere in between. Just know that there's really not a specific day for a habit to actually set in stone, but rather it really depends on not only you, the behavior that you actually want to engage in, and also like the context of what that behavior is in. So start where you want to on your path to change, allow yourself to feel successful, and then just follow and trust the process. This process is known as the skills of change. The skills of change is more or less being able to feel your way through the process. And we're going to cover a little bit of each different skill. The first skill is behavior crafting. And this is when you add new habits and also subtract habits when they feel just about right. The next skill is self-insight. And this is when you know that new habits are going to be impactful for you or not. You then go into the process skill, which is when you know when to push or pull the difficulty of a habit. If it feels too hard or if it feels too easy, you know how to adjust. You then have context, and context is the ability to redesign your environment as you see fit. And lastly, you have mindset. And mindset is the skill where you are able to develop an identity around your behaviors. And let's end with 7 simple steps for how to design your behaviors from everything that you learned about in this video already. Number 1, clarify your aspiration. This is where you want to see impact in your life or the outcomes that you want. Number 2, explore behavior options. This is how you find the motivation to take a behavior of what you want to be doing. Number 3, match with specific behaviors. Your specific behaviors are more or less your ability, so you want to make them as easy as possible. Number 4, start tiny. Start with the tiniest habit you can that takes you 30 seconds or less. 5, find a good prompt that works for you. 6, celebrate your successes. Every win that you have towards a behavior, you should be celebrating it. And 7, you should troubleshoot, iterate, and expand upon your behaviors. We learned about how to troubleshoot your behaviors, we learned about how you can iterate upon them, and we also learned that you can expand them to make them more difficult if you need to. And that was how to design your behaviors with tiny habits. Don't forget, start tiny, and we'll see you next week.